Conflict 47. In a world of rift-fueled madness and horrors unlike man has seen before, we tend to focus on the battles and overall war within Conflict 47 and the universe that surrounds it. With battles taking place in the ruins of Dresden, post-apocalyptic zombie-filled wasteland, or in the jungles of the numerous islands in the Pacific with Shiburu cannon-wielding Japanese troops yelling banzai. But not much attention is paid to the individual soldier. Well, since we've started our Conflict 47 journey last fall, I've always wondered what the life of the average infantryman is like in the twisted and bleak setting of Conflict 47. Well, that changes now as we use a TTRPG system and a solo Game Master emulator to guide us in this new adventure. Hey, how's it going? Mike from Mike Rolls Dice, and welcome to our first episode of our K47 TTRPG adaptation here using Savage Worlds and the Mythic GM emulator. As you saw in our introduction, it's a hard life for a basic infantryman in the world of Conflict 47, with all sorts of horrors of the rift and power armor wearing troops, walkers crushing through them at any given moment. It's a pretty rough and hard life for sure. So trying to make a character for Jerry, we wanted to keep it pretty simple. With Savage Worlds, there's obviously all sorts of things that we can do to make the character heroic. There's all sorts of edges, which the edges are kind of like their abilities, as well as, picking what sort of skills. We went for a pretty bog standard basic infantryman, especially being able to use the Weird Wars 2 adaptation that Pinnacle Entertainment Group sells for the older version of Savage Worlds. I can essentially use that as a good template. So that being said, we came up with this character on stream with the help of chat and just going through the process. We'll just go through and explain Jerry as a character and how we built him in Savage Worlds. So as I mentioned, we're going to be using Savage Worlds, which I have the book right here. This is the updated version, the Suede, the Savage Worlds Adventure Edition. And the great thing about this game is that essentially it works with any sort of setting that you can imagine. It has everything in the rules from using ancient weapons like spears all the way up to laser weapons for futuristic stuff, including a bunch of World War II stuff. There's a bunch of supplement materials like the Fantasy Companion and Sci-Fi Companion, and we're going to be using all sorts of stuff, but the main supplement that we're going to be using along with Savage Worlds is the Weird War 2 supplement. It's almost a perfect setting for the Weird War 2 setting of Conflict 47. So for Savage Worlds, there's really just some basic items we're going to be using. We have some dice, and it uses dice from a D4 through a D12 for your attribute and your skill rolls. And your attributes are kind of like your main stats: the agility, the smarts, spirit, strength, and vigor, which all are tied into certain skills, with things like strength affecting your melee capabilities and your damage for melee, and things like vigor for your toughness. For the attributes, we have a agility of 8, which we bumped up from the hindrance point that we spent. We have a smarts of 6, we have a spirit of 6, we have a strength of 6, and a 6 in vigor. So that being said, we also have the skill rolls. These are the rolls that Jerry is going to be making when he is attempting, let's say, something like athletics, common knowledge, or fighting and shooting. For instance, if he's trying to make a shot with his M1 Garand, he's going to make a shooting roll. And depending on how good you are, you get a particular dice to roll for that skill. And Savage Worlds is very simple. All you need to do, the target number you need to beat is a 4. Then for the skills, you start off with these skills that I'm going to start naming off first, but we have a 6 in athletics, a 6 in common knowledge, a 6 in notice, a 6 in persuasion, and a 6 in stealth. Those are the ones that you start off with in a 4, and we've spent points to bump those up to a 6. Now for the next skills, we had to pay to get them and then bump them up if we wanted to. We have a 6 in fighting, which is melee combat. We have a 6 in shooting. He went through basic training. He knows how to handle himself. Then we have a 4 in healing, so he can at least attempt healing without a -2. If you do attempt a roll without having the skill, you can try it. You can always try stuff in Savage Worlds. It's just you get a -2. So we have the healing skill at least in a D4. We have the survival skill in a D4, and we have the language skill in a D4, which means that, if he's trying to talk with someone in a different language, we'll make a roll for it to see essentially how good he did with it. For instance, if he's got a D6 in shooting, which he has, then he will roll 2 dice because the wild cards, what he is, the essentially like the main character of the story, or one of the main characters, he gets an additional die, a d6, that he gets to roll with his appropriate skill or attribute die. So he's going to roll 2d6 because his skill level is a d6 for the shooting, and all he needs to do is get a 4. Now there's pluses and minuses depending on distance, illumination, right, whether he's wounded, all sorts of stuff. I'm not going to go over every rule. We'll talk about it as we play, but I'm not going to try and bog it down too much. But he just essentially needs to get a 4. And for every 4 you get over the target number that you need to beat, then that counts as a raise, which essentially just means or how spectacular you accomplished the task you're trying to do, as well as giving you bonuses for damage and additional d6 and damage rolls. So with the skill rolls, though, you only, even though we're rolling 2d6, for instance, for shooting, we're going to take one of those results, so the highest result. The other thing is there are exploding die, which is one of my favorite mechanics in Savage Worlds, where if you roll a 6 on a d6, then you get to roll it again, and you get to keep going. So there's been times where we've had players in my games roll the exploding die like 5 times in a row, which just leads to the craziest stuff, you know. So that being said, we have our skills and attributes, and then we have our, as well as that, we have our main stats for Jerry. So he is a human, and he has a base pace, which is his movement, of 6 inches. So everything's done with inches, including the range for shooting and all that. Now he can run, where he can roll his pace die, which is his athletics, I believe, so he'd be rolling like a d6. But that's his movement, 6 inches on the tabletop for a standard move. And the way movement works is too, you can move at any point. It's really cool. You can move 2 inches, shoot, move another 2 inches, do a task, and then move 2 inches and hide or something. And including with that, there's actions. You essentially can take 3 actions, but if each additional action you take, so for the first action, you're good. If you take 2 actions, you're going to be at a -2 penalty, and 3 actions, you're going to be at a -4. So if you want to do more stuff, it's definitely more punishing. Next up, we have parry, which is going to be the target number that somebody's trying to beat when fighting him in melee. So that's how melee works. With shooting, you just need a 4, with the pluses or minuses depending on the conditions. And last but not least, we have toughness. He has 7 toughness, so he actually has 5 toughness, but he's getting 2 of it from his issued steel helmet that he got from the army. So it's providing 2 points of armor for him. So his total toughness is 7. And any AP will bypass that armor. So next up we have the gear, and this is all just the essential sort of stuff that I picked from a basic infantryman kit in the Weird War II supplement. We have a steel helmet for the armor bonus, as well as just a bunch of additional gear. He's got an M1 Garand and a bayonet. Those are his 2 weapons. And he's got like a backpack, web gear, canteen, gas mask, all the standard stuff you'd expect for a soldier that is on the front lines in K47. All right, last but not least, we also have, these are pretty big. These are the hindrances and the edges or abilities. If we were playing the Pathfinder version of Savage Worlds and you were playing a bard or something, you would have special abilities that come with the class that essentially be like built in, that are like your edges. The edges are like abilities in Savage Worlds, and they're just things that kind of help give a little bit more flavor to your character. The hindrances, though, which you get points to spend on edges with your hindrances, this is what we picked for Jerry. So we have 2 major hindrances, and these are really affecting, they know that they can affect gameplay, but they also affect how you roleplay the character, which is pretty big. So we gave him heroic, which essentially means that the way I like to think of it is that he's willing to put his life on the line for a mission, or to save his fellow soldiers, or to even help somebody in need. Let's say there's a Axis grandmother that just ratted him out to Colonel von Liechtenstein of the Green Hand, the Stormtroop and platoon commander. And all of a sudden her barn catches on fire and she's trapped in there for whatever crazy reason. He's going to still try and help her, even though he should probably just try and run away, because he doesn't want to let this old lady be trapped in a barn on fire. So that's our heroic hindrance. And then as well, we picked outsider, because what you're going to find out, or we're going to find out, he's pretty far, he's at least in enemy territory, if not pretty deep in. One way or another, he's going to end up that way, is the way I picture it. So outsider means that he's going to get -2 to his persuasion rolls, which is a skill roll for dealing with other people, essentially in enemy territory, which is going to be pretty much his whole thing, I'm assuming. So if he does manage, for instance, to deal with any local populace or any sort of Axis troops, he's going to be at a -2 to all of his persuasion rolls when dealing with them. Now for the edges, for the bonuses, now those are negatives, but they're fun negatives for the roleplay perspective, but they are negatives. So for that, they give you some points to spend on edges, as well as the fact that we actually bumped up our agility. So for the edge, we have linguist, meaning that he actually does know 3 languages. He knows German, he knows Russian, and he knows French. So he at least knows the languages for the area and for where he's been fighting, for instance. And last but not least, then we also took quick, which quick essentially means that if the way Savage Worlds and turns work, you have a deck of cards, which we're going to go over here in a sec. This is like the initiative, like in D&D, but instead of rolling to see when you're going to go, you get drawn a card. And if you get essentially it goes from like an ace to a 2, and it goes by the suit as well. But essentially, the higher the card, the earlier in the round you get to go. So essentially, if you had an ace, you're going to be going before somebody that's got a 5. Now, Jerry has quick, which is an edge we picked, which is really nice in general. And what that does is, if he gets drawn a 5, he gets to draw a new card. The other thing is that jokers. There's 2 jokers in the deck. If you draw a joker, first off, you get a Benny, which is a good thing we're going to talk about. But you get to go at any point in the turn, including interrupting someone else's turn with the Joker, and you get +2 to all your rolls and damage rolls that turn. So getting a Joker is a very big deal. Before we get over into like the accessories we're using and all of that, just to explain everything, he does have an M1 Garand, which has a 24-inch range, actually 24 inches, like measuring like tabletop, for the range with no penalty, and then goes up to 48 and 96. So there is times we'll be obviously using the miniature on the table and filming it and all that, but there are times probably where we'll just maybe have some time where he has to make a shot. We don't have to set up everything. We could just be like, all right, he's off, he's shooting a couple 100 meters off into the distance. This is going to be that long range shot with the -4 penalty. It's got 2d8 damage, and for the damage rolls you actually add up the damage rolls together, and it's got AP2. And last but not least, we have a bayonet, which is strength plus d4 damage, but if you put it on the gun, then you get strength plus d6, you increase your parry by 1, and increase the reach of the weapon, the melee weapon, by 1 inch, and use it with 2 hands. Alright, so with that out of the way, that's his character sheet and how we built Jerry, how he's equipped, how he's going to handle himself. We can move on over to some of the stuff we'll be using for Savage. All right, now moving over the accessories and stuff, just so that you have an understanding of what we're going to be doing and using. We do have a standard deck of cards we're using for the action deck. So we're just going to draw cards, and whoever gets the highest cards with the right suit is going to be going first. So I do have a special Pathfinder edition deck, but it's so big, this is just a lot easier to use the old standard bicycle deck. I do have some status cards, which I'll use from time to time, but the other thing I'll do, so essentially you can get shaken and you can get wounded. You can essentially take up to 3 wounds in Savage Worlds before you get taken out. So like the 4th wound will take you out. Shaken is like you being pinned up, so you need to deal with this before you can do anything. And then we have the wounded token, because you can have up to 3 wounds. So for each wound you have, you're at a -1 as well. So we'll be using either the cards or the tokens throughout filming to show who's wounded or whatnot. Then we have some templates as well, because there is magic in the world of conflict as well as the world of Savage Worlds. All sorts of crazy, some sort of Axis blood mage bomb going off, or it could be some sort of Schwerfield cannon, for instance. We got our little measuring tool here, so we can measure real quickly without having to use a measuring tape. And then for the bennies, these are cool. I got these for the Savage World Pathfinder box, little poker chips, official Savage Worlds one. But essentially, we have 3 bennies to start off with, because that's the standard. You can use this to do all sorts of stuff. Essentially, we're going to be either using it to do rerolls on our skills. We can reroll damage. We can use it to stop being shaken. We can use it to try and soak damage rolls, as well as drawing new cards for the initiative. And one of the last things we can do is essentially like kind of change the story. My players used to use it at the end of a session. Can we like that really cool NPC that was around, can we have him like just hang out on the ship from now on? You know, they would do stuff like that. So that's a way you can spend the bennies. And then we have our Savage Worlds dice that we're going to be using for our trait rolls. And the green dice here with the dragon on it, let's see if we can get it to focus. This green one with the dragon here is going to be our wild card die. So I'm going to use the yellow ones for our character because that's a cool Savage Worlds one we got. And then I'm going to be using some red dice for the enemy. And last but not least, this brings us to the next section, which is the Mythic emulator. I'm going to try and edit this to make sure it's quite brief as well. But we have two D100s, a single die and then the double-digit die. And that leads us to the Fate chart and the Mythic emulator. We don't have a GM. Now you can play solo and just be like, yeah, this is what's going to happen, and I'm just going to force the character to do everything. But I like not necessarily knowing everything. So what we're going to use is the Mythic emulator, the Mythic GM emulator. And by rolling the D100s, we're going to be able to just essentially from a 1 to 100, we can find out whether it's a yes or no. And generally it's 50-50. Just think of a 50 and under. You want to roll under, by the way, to find out the answer. If we roll a 50 under, that means, for instance, if we ask, that's a yes. If we roll a 51 or over, that's a no. And there is something called the chaos factor as well. That's just going to be like how chaotic things are. So the more chaotic things are, then we adjust it to where it's essentially going to give us more yeses. And the less chaotic, then it's going to give us more no's. It's going to just kind of change the tide. It's going to help push us in ways that we don't need to actively try and do it. The game's going to do it itself. So that's pretty much it. We're just going to roll our D100s. And the other thing is I have a list I have everything for the Mythic, but there's just a way of keeping track. Think of it as like scenes in a movie. So we're going to be doing a scene at a time. And then we have some bookkeeping stuff. But we're not going to go into everything because we'll leave that for as we play and everything. And last but not least, we have Jerry, which is one of my winter bolt action models from the U.S. Winter Bolt Action Starter Army. He's going to be our basic rifleman that unfortunately has found himself in the on the front lines of a battle in Konflikt 47. So either way, I'm excited. I've ran Savage Worlds games in the past for Rev and some friends of ours. I've done some solo stuff here on the channel, but it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to focus on. I ended up focusing on battle reports and obviously Konflikt 47 later on. So, but finding a way to be able to mix solo TTRPG or solo roleplay stuff with Konflikt 47 seemed like a really cool idea, and a lot of folks seem pretty interested. So I'm excited to share this with you and get started on this journey. What's going to happen? I don't know. I tend to put my characters through a pretty hard time, so I guess we'll have to see what happens. Well, thank you so much to everybody that voted for the character and gave recommendations and whatnot and shown interest. So I'm excited to share this with you folks. All right, well, again, my name is Mike from Mike Rolls Dice. Thank you again for tuning in for our first episode of our Konflikt 47 solo roleplay series. I've already actually recorded the first solo session, so I had to sit down and I was like, you know what, let me make the character episode first before I get too deep into it. But needless to say, I'll just tell you this, it's going to be one hell of a ride. All right, well, thank you again for tuning in, and thank you again for everyone for watching, our YouTube members and everyone that supports the channel here. We couldn't do without you folks. The first solo session is recorded and I'm working on it, and we're going to try and have it out here somewhat soon. So quite busy with Invasion America coming up and everything else. But don't worry, we're going to have a ton of different Konflikt content, as well as other games here on this channel.